Don't buy this. Just kidding, we didn't buy this. This was a gift from a friend of ours, and we're really happy to have it. It's a nice phalaenopsis. Cool coloring inside the lip color. Anyway, today we just want to look at a couple things that we've learned the hard way. Sometimes the success of your orchid may be determined in part before you even buy it or it gets to your house. So we'll look at like three things that we've kind of learned and hopefully make your orchid journey more happy and successful. So the first big thing, it just is kind of a catch-all. We'll call it, wrong plant, wrong time. And that can mean a lot of things. So first of all, it means the wrong plant is a plant that you really have no business trying to grow, certainly just in your house. Like these guys. I don't think we really have any business growing catasetums. Oh well, we're going to keep trying. Now, if you're doing environmental controls or you don't mind buying a bunch of lights and fans and misters or whatever you want to do, you'll notice we don't grow Vandas here at El Pilar Orchids.
No Vandas.
Because, we live in like northwest Germany, central Germany, and temperate climate, we can't grow Vandas here naturally, let's say. So it would take a lot for us to grow them inside, so we have no business growing them. And we kind of found that out the hard way early on in our journey. When we were just buying orchids, we really didn't know what to look for, and so just buy plants. Once you find some things, of course, experiment, branch out, try some new orchids, but do some research ahead of time and see if it's even possible to grow it without a bunch of environmental controls inside of an apartment. Put that plant down for now. A lot of orchid nurseries won't even ship in the winter. So you don't want to try to buy plants that, especially if it's like a warm, kind of, really temperamental plant, you don't want to buy it if the weather is at all going to change when it's in transit. And so a lot of times, a good orchid nursery, if they are shipping in questionable conditions, they'll include like a heat pack inside of the box. So if that is the case for you and your orchid nursery, try some and see how their shipping is. But, we try to buy plants like in the spring and summer, just because the weather is safer and we know we're not going to lose a lot of plants. But of course, if you see something, we've been known to buy plants out of season, let's say. Obviously, the wrong plant would be a sick plant. If you are like even grocery store, foul shopping, if you see something on the leaves, kind of notice some things. We've got one of our paths that is showing some signs of some kind of an issue on the leaves. But if the leaves look at all strange, or certainly if, you can recognize any signs, just don't buy it if it shows any signs of stress or disease. It's just not worth it, especially for grocery store plants. Obviously if you're buying plants from a nursery and it comes that way, then hey, what are you going to do? In that case, I certainly suggest that you take the initiative to just try to contact the seller and maybe get a refund or an exchange for a new plant, because it's not worth introducing possibly disease. Or if it's a really nice plant, then you don't want it slowly dying while you're trying to figure it out, when it just could have been a bum plant from the nursery anyway. And for us, another wrong time, we don't buy Paphiopedilums when they are in bud. And sometimes it'll say that on the website when you're buying it, like it'll mention, one spike, flowering plant. That is something that we try to avoid. I would rather buy a plant not in flower, just because, for us, we have really bad luck in transit, and pretty much as soon as all of our Paphiopedilums that we've ever bought that were in bud, as soon as I got to our apartment, the buds just faded and died. I think I don't think we've ever had a Paphiopedilum arrive in bud that has gone on to flower. So yeah, that's something we don't do. And so that just kind of, we typically don't buy plants that are in flower. That's just our thing. I mean, we hope and anticipate that they will flower again under our care. Maybe that's optimistic. That could also go the other way, where if you really need to see something, like if you're trying to maybe use it for like potentially breeding with, and you really want to make sure that the flower is what you want and see how the presentation looks and what the potential of the plant is, then I guess, yeah, okay, the wrong time would be buying it when it's not in flower. So, the wrong time kind of depends on your own circumstances. Are you ready to grow a plant that maybe doesn't grow well in your environment? Like in our experience, like I had a terrarium idea when I first started growing orchids, and I started this terrarium but didn't really start it and have all the stuff I needed. But of course, I bought a bunch of plants for it and then couldn't give them the care they needed. And it was a huge mess. So make sure if you're going to buy something that's maybe not in your environmental conditions, hey, you prepare for that plant to give it the best conditions possible. I mean, that seems like common sense, but we all get caught up in the orchid figure on, oh, I want this one. It's so amazing. Look at that. And then you really can't, you have no business trying to grow that plant. It's just going to be sad and frustrating. All right, so the second thing to avoid when you're buying orchids is not to buy the most expensive orchid. I know that also seems like what, but sometimes when you go online to the vendors, if you're buying plants online, which I encourage you to do, then they'll offer various price ranges of orchids. So you can get anything from like maybe a €10 plant or $10 plant, let's say, within a single type of plant on a nursery. And some nurseries even offer like 3 tiers of pricing. So you get like a 10 one and a 15 one, and then maybe a €25 plant. And so, you have those options, but for us, we try to go into the middle. Sometimes, like I said, because often if it's the most expensive one, that's because it's in bloom or in bud. And so, it's going to be more expensive because it's going to flower for you, hopefully. But for us, the middle tier is where we find we get the best bang for our buck, in that we can see if the plant is vigorous and a good grower, if it's diseased. I mean, sometimes, let's face it, you'll pay for a bad plant that basically a nursery can force into bloom. And so, yeah, it may be in bloom and you're going to pay top price for it, but the plant itself isn't in the best condition. Whereas maybe if you get one of those middle tier plants that's been tucked away right in the middle of the group in the greenhouse, and it's in its middle of its growth stage but isn't flowering yet, then you can get a super strong plant that, yeah, maybe it'll take 6 months for you to bloom. But for us, that's worth the savings and the time to grow it. And yeah, we don't waste time with plants that are weak or, they just aren't, whatever. Yeah, because we also know when we buy it in bloom, it's going to fade probably, and you never know how long that thing's been in bloom. That's not always true. Some of these grocery store no-IDs can stay in bloom for a long time, even after you pick them up from the grocery store. So you don't need the most expensive plant. And I would say if you're going to invest in like stock or specimen orchids, if you're a serious collector that really wants to get into, let's say, a different level of orchid growing and collecting, then it's worth it to make contacts and physically visit people if it's possible, or to make stronger relationships either in the digital world, online. I will say when we first got into orchids through some of our orchid contacts, we were lucky to get some plants that we probably otherwise wouldn't have gotten just because of those contacts. Yeah, let's say just avoid maybe just like doing pot shots at all the random nurseries and eBay and all this kind of stuff. Like, avoid that kind of orchid buying and consumption. I would suggest, developing stronger ties where you can get different plants and, build a relationship with your orchid vendor, or, your orchid society or orchid society members. So I think that's worth it better than just, avoid buying every little grocery store fowl or thing you come across on eBay. Yeah, that's number 2. Or the too expensive. Oh, I thought number 2 was too expensive. That was a rambling number 2. The next one is against no IDs again. I'm ragging on the no IDs. What is it? Don't buy blue orchids. Just avoid them, please. Because, it's not going to bloom the same way. It's going to be white and it's going to be unimpressive, I think. It's not going to bloom again blue. I hope you know that. I think most of us do. But if you're absolutely new to orchids and you come across these blue orchids at your grocery store, just avoid them. Don't buy them. And as a bonus tip, when you buy a plant, avoid just taking it and throwing it right into your collection. Definitely inspect it when you buy a new plant. At least look it over thoroughly for any signs of bugs or infection, which is harder to spot. We avoid buying like these imports that sometimes, a group is getting and we're going to import a bunch from Brazil or wherever. And unfortunately, even sometimes when you buy those plants from mainstream nurseries, they will just come with a lot of pests. We've experienced once or twice that and had new pests introduced into our grow space garden living room that, sometimes we struggled to get rid of them. And 1 or 2 of them are still with us even a couple years later from buying imported plants. So be wary of that, and we avoid that. Let the nurseries import them, and hopefully, wait a year. If there's still some left, hopefully the nursery has repotted it or dealt with those insects and infestations, so you don't have to. Anyways, best of luck with buying your orchids. Hope you get something good. Thanks for checking in, guys. See you back here at El Pilar soon.